webinar. It's 3 p.m. We're going to get started. We've got a full docket of information to talk about today. Glad you're all here. I first just want to turn the microphone over to Susan. Just want to remind you that, sorry, I'm ahead a little bit here, that at the end of the webinar, there will be an evaluation form that will pop up, a link to that, and we hope that you'll take that and fill it out while the webinar is still fresh in your mind. Without further ado, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Susan Lugo, a CoSA board member and archivist from the Virgin Islands, who's going to introduce today's speakers. Susan?
Thanks, and just a reminder about using the chat during the presentation for Q&A. We'll take the questions after both of our presenters for today have spoken, and I'll help monitor those questions with along. It's my pleasure to introduce to you today two speakers. This is our funder update, and so we have joining us today Bob Horton. He joined IMLS in 2011, and he serves as the IMLS Associate Deputy Director for Library Services. And in that role, he's responsible for the management of the discretionary grant programs in the Office of Library Services. A 2013 report evaluating the impact of just one of these programs, the Laura Bush 21st Century Librarian Program, during the period 2003 to 2009, found collaborative institutional relationships such as archives were key components of successful applications on that program and program sustainability. Prior to IMLS, Bob most recently served as the State Archivist and Director of the Library Publications and Collections Division at Minnesota Historical Society. Studied taught at Brown University, Ohio State, Indiana University, and Yale University before beginning his archival career at the State Archives of Indiana. And other activities, he served on advisory boards at the College of St. Catherine's Library and Information School and Legacy Tobacco Document Library at the University of California, San Francisco. He's also chaired the Center for Legislative Archives Descriptive Practices Working Group. Bob most closely with digital content and electronic records projects, which I know many of you will be interested to hear, directing the Minnesota Historical Society's NDIP initiative. He worked with legislative digital content and its preservation, the Oral History Online Project funded by IMLS, and National Newspaper Digitization Program funded by NEH. Also worked on the digitization of Swedish language newspapers in collaboration with the National Library of Sweden. Our speaker today, Joel Whirl, and you'll see where their backgrounds intersect on many levels here, is the Senior Program in the Division of Preservation and Access of the National Endowment for the Humanities, where he currently coordinates the division's Humanities Collections and Reference Resources Program, or HCRR. HCRR's program was established in 2006, but its objectives can be traced to the early days of NEH and its very first call for proposals 4 years earlier in 1966. In a 2013 evaluation of a program outcomes conducted by NEH with input from 177 HCRR project managers, it was reported long-term impact of HCRR grants for the decade 2000 to 2010 has been, quote, found for scholars, educators, students, and the public, as well as for librarians, archivists, and curators, unquote. Joe is also an adjunct instructor in the Applied History Program at George Mason University. Prior to joining NEH in October 2006, Joel worked for 20 years with, wait for it, University of Minnesota's Immigration History Research Center, ending there as Head of Research Collections and Associate Director. And from 2002 to 2005, he served on the Council and Executive Committee of SAA and as editor of the Midwest Archives Journal Archival Issues. He's co-chair of the Program Committee for the 2008 SAA Annual Meeting in San Francisco. And publications have appeared in both archival and immigration, ethnic history journals, and he was named a Distinguished Fellow of SAA in 2007. Some of you may be thinking this is not a webinar featuring famous archivists from Minnesota, although that's just one of several areas in which today's speakers share a similar background. So today we'll be talking with Bob and Joel about funding opportunities for archives in each of their respective institutions. To begin with you, so I'll turn the program over to you, and welcome to both of you.
Thank you much. Thank you. You're a very kind introduction, and I appreciate it. And it's a pleasure to be with you all today. I'm a relatively formal presentation, and I'd welcome any kind of questions or comments along the way. So I gather the chat function and or the Q&A function would be the easiest ways to suggest something or ask something. So please don't hesitate to jump in at any point. What we'll talk about, again, on a very informal basis, is a quick background of the IMLS to make sure everybody understands where and what we do, where we are. Talk about some current programs, the grant programs that will be of most interest to you all, and then I'll talk about some possible changes in the program, and I hope to get some feedback from you about those. So let's launch into it. IMLS is the primary source of federal support for libraries and museums, and as someone is no doubt going to point out, as is often the case, there's no A in IMLS, but we do and always have interpreted libraries to mean libraries and archives. So we happy to fund archives. We encourage archivists to apply for programs, and I will myself happily work with any of you who have any ideas you want to explore. We make grants. We do meetings, a word I learned when I moved to Washington. I usually used to have meetings and conferences, but now we have convenings. We conduct research, and we also provide information through research and data gathering functions on the state of the archives and libraries and museums in the country. Our budget for the current fiscal year is $227 million, and we are funded through the Library Services and Technology Act and the Museum Services Act. It's a little misleading in some ways, the budget, because the vast majority of the funding goes out through the Grant to States program. About $150 million annually is allocated through a formula grant and goes to state library authorities to spend a fair amount of flexibility. The flow is primarily based on population, so of course California gets the most, Delaware I believe gets the lowest amount. We set some goals, and of course the federal government has quite a few rules and regulations, but each state has a bit of latitude in establishing priorities and determining how it spends funding. So the reason why I bring it up is that many states have their own grant programs, and it's worth your while to check in to see if any funding is available through your state library agency, and determine how you might benefit from that process. Beyond, we have a number of grant programs that are described as discretionary. That is, that they are based not on a formula but by application. And those are all, for the most part, competitive, highly competitive. The Laura Bush 21st Century Program focuses on education for professionals in the library and archives field. National Leadership Grants covers, at this point, a lot of ground. Basically, within the framework of national leadership, you can fit a whole bunch of ideas. But we're moving towards a little more focus and a little more direction, which I'll talk about later. We have a Sparks Ignition Grant Program, which is basically a program that allows for a certain amount of risk, and it does that by having a fairly small amount of money available. It's up to $25,000 per grant. We encourage people to look at that if they're going to try something new. The only the only few qualifications are that it is in fact something new, and that whoever gets one of those SPARCS grant has to produce a white paper describing what worked or conversely what didn't work, so that the field as a whole will benefit from it. And we also have grant programs that are focused on applicants from Native American, Native Hawaiian community, and those, I don't think any of you will qualify, though you may well have entities in your states who qualify for the American program. You have to be a federally recognized tribe operating some library functions. Those have obviously some severe limitations, but we are encouraging both Native American and Native Hawaiian applicants to look for partnerships locally for a variety of reasons, and so you may encounter or you may talk to the eligible applicants in those programs, and they may well be doing something of interest to you and something you might want to foster. Our website, IMLS.gov, has a lot of information on the agency and its programs. I have on the slide right now is for grant applicants and describes or provides access to all the different grant names, the grant programs. It lists them by project types, and if you can see the small, very small, I don't know if you can see my arrow, move that around, but on the left as you face the screen, in the far left column, about midway down, is a link to program guidelines. And that's probably the most valuable source of information for any applicant, because it describes the criteria for eligibility, the priorities of a program, process for applying, the people to contact, the deadlines, and all the terms and conditions that an applicant has to understand and implement part of a grant grant application. So those are well worth studying. Currently, we just posted our our guidelines for the Laura Bush program, with the deadline for that September 15th. So want to see what a set of guidelines looks like. I would urge you to look at those, and if you're interested, move forward pretty quickly, because it's not all that far away. For those of you who have applied before to IMLS, and even for Laura Bush programs, you should note that because of some recent Office of Management and Budget rulings and I'll talk more about it later, what they call a super circular, which is a kind of a reason and clarification of the various federal regulations regarding federal funding agencies. The template for the guidelines has changed radically. Content, maybe not so much, but the appearance of it is very, very different, and there's some additional information. So even if you're familiar with the program and the IMLS, you definitely want to see what's new, because there have been some significant changes. The explanation of what sort of guidelines we have available. They'll include both Office of Library Services and Office of Museum Services. You really want to look at Office of Library Services, is that's the funding that the programs that I manage. So again, also in response to some direction from the Office of Management, Budget, and the administration, we're defining some priorities as an agency. And the ones that we are focusing on right now are listed right now on the screen. First is to develop a national digital platform. Essentially, the tools, the research, the infrastructure, the collaboration, the partnerships that are going to allow us to really enhance the value of our collections and provide better and improved access to them. So that's our first goal. Second is learning spaces, which is the idea that libraries, archives, and museums are increasingly the leaders of a whole variety of informal learning opportunities, sometimes that complement formal learning opportunities, what's happening in K-12 or happening in the college level, university level, but also that there could be these aiming at adult education, health literacy, information literacy, digital literacy, virtually every kind of literacy you can think of, but that it as a whole is the use of collections for particular types of activities that meet audience needs. So it's the idea, to a certain extent, of focusing on participatory learning, on informal learning, on engaged learning with the communities around you, determining what's of interest and how best to meet those audience needs. Third is STEM, which is, as well will be aware, is a subject of a lot of discussion and certainly concern with the current administration, strengthened by, I think, results from a survey called PIAC, and I can't remember what the acronym stands for, the idea that, or the recognition that in the United States we're falling behind in some basic skills, and that address that gap, that lack of capacity, is something that all of us need to, on a goal that we all need to take on. And that a whole variety of collections and materials within our institutions could be of service to address STEM learning in a variety of different ways. Last, continuing education, and this speaks primarily to our goals for the Laura Bush program. And in the past, a fair amount of the funding has gone to library and information schools, development of curriculum, master's programs, etc., early career research for faculty members. And we've now tried to push a priority, or the focus of the program, towards a priority of educating people in the workforce, with the idea that we have thousands and thousands of people in libraries and archives that have immediate need for the skills and expertise that will support all the other activities that we or virtually anybody in the first century are promoting. So we can talk about that if you want. At the joint meeting next month, I'm going to speak at 3 different board meetings and 4 different sessions. I mean, so there will be a lot of opportunities if you're coming to Washington about what the IMLS is doing with continuing education, and hopes to promote through a coalition that's going to help professions, archives, libraries, and museums start to work together to address the needs of the joint needs of those groups, and to do this in the most cost-effective and we hope effective manner. So, priority. The upcoming deadline, I mentioned Laura Bush on 15th September. In 3rd October, we're going to have a new National Leadership Grant program. For that cycle, only going to accept proposals that explicitly address the priorities that I've been discussing. Continuing education set aside, because that's Laura Bush. So those 3 priorities of National Digital Platform, Learning Spaces, and STEM will be the focus of that funding program. And we'll also try a new approach of the actual application process, which I can go into if anybody really wants to get in the nuts and bolts. But I urge you to take a look at guidelines, which will be posted in the 2nd week of August. So take a look at those, and then from that point and at the meeting in Washington, I'll be happy to talk to you about that. We have a 2nd round of National Leadership Grants on the horizon, 2nd of February, and the same date on the 4 Spark submission. So those are all upcoming deadlines. Some lessons that we're trying to sort of say, now that we've learned some of these lessons, we've been taught some of these lessons, or one means or another, we're trying to work into our programs, and we'll have an effect on how those programs are shaped and how what projects are funded. We, as I think everybody in the world is at this point, are facing a challenge of evaluation. We all need to justify our funding in the federal government. Increasingly, we're expected to do that by demonstrable impacts, by showing demonstrable impacts and outcomes. And currently, we've funded a wide range of activities, very difficult to activate in any kind of meaningful or compelling way. So that's one of the motivations for an increased focus to our activities. Ideally, the Office of Management, or the Office of Management Budget has suggested, suggested is not perhaps the strongest term I could use, that all federal funding agencies start to define goals at agency level that are going to be inherited by the programs, and then from there, inherited by each and every project of program funds. In theory, we should be, in the next few years, working towards a framework, a conceptual framework that allows us to aggregate outcomes up, so that we say, here's the aggregate results of the projects we funded, and here's how they demonstrate how we've achieved our program and our agency goals. So we're forced us to be a lot more serious about performance measurements and evaluation. With that, we're looking increasingly at the challenge of sustainability. As we look at what we funded in the past, a lot of activities present themselves as models, and they work very well as long as they're funded by project, as long as they're on project funding. It seems increasingly unusual to see something move successfully from project funding to ongoing support. So sustainability is going to be something that we'll be looking more closely at, trying to be more realistic about it in our own expectations, trying to help people understand really what they need to consider when they present an idea as a model. We've also, I guess this is a close analogy to what I was talking about with sustainability. We see a lot of programs, our projects present themselves as a likely model for replication and adoption. We see a lot of followers very often. So we're going to have to really define what we mean by sustainability when someone's presenting a model as a project proposal as well. It's a management budget, but I just kind of underscore it. They're interested in measurement, as I said. They're also encouraging us to move from what's called compliance to performance auditing. And the interpretation of that is compliance very often just takes the form of, you sent in your report, you spent all your money, you can document your activities. Performance auditing is, you said you were going to change the world, and now show me how you did it. So a much closer attention, not to the kind of nuts and bolts of the grants administration process, but a much closer attention to the benefits of the actual activities. All of those are good reasons why we're going to be looking to focus our activities, define some priorities at an agency level. And I think one of the things we've identified as going to be absolutely essential to making that work is encouraging collaboration and sharing. There's just no way that we can foresee that we can run a set of grant programs that will address the expectations of our funding sources and the Office of Management Budget and the administration, unless we're encouraging people to start working together. We just don't see how we can get to those performance metrics. I'm happy to talk to anybody who can show me a better way, but we think that's really going to be critical. So that's my 1,000-foot overview. First, please do take a look at our program guidelines and then contact any one of us. Our contact information is liberally sprinkled across the website in the program guidelines. That'll get you into the nuts and bolts of the application process and the priorities of the IMLS. And this is how you can contact me. And if you're coming to Washington for the joint meeting next month, I'll be there or many days, 4 or 5 of them. And as I said, also come to the board meetings of all 3 organizations and then a variety of other of the education work groups as well. So please look for me, send an email, give me a call, and I'd be happy to talk to you about any aspect of this that you'd like.
Thanks, Ann. I guess I pick it up from here, and I want to start with echoing your thanks of Susan. It was a very generous and kind introduction, Susan. And thanks to everybody for attending today. It's good to be part of this. Between the presentation that Bob and I did earlier this week and our Minnesota connections, we're really feeling joined at the hip here this week. And you're going to hear some echoes, I think, as you go along with my comments to some of the kinds of things that you heard from Bob. So I'm going to be talking here about NEH and particularly funding opportunities that focus on archives and records repositories. And a little bit of background, NEH is an independent federal agency created during the heady days of the Johnson administration and the Great Society. And our core mission essentially reflects several of the funding programs and visions that are part of the endowment, strengthening teaching and learning, research, public programming, and providing support for the institutional base of the humanities, et cetera. What are the humanities? And sometimes it seems self-evident, and it also seems in many respects from as we get to be a kind of impractical or esoteric type of mission. But I think one could argue that today more than ever, the kinds of opportunities for learning and knowledge in areas such as history, literature, comparative religion could be highly important in dealing with contemporary issues and understanding our present world. So the humanities are ever present, ever important. And at the core of what we serve, this is an indication of the organizational network, if you will, of what's within NEH and the distribution of our resources. The allocation we have this year of $146 million is pretty much steady state over the past several years, with a little bit of ups and downs here since recession. I'm going to be focusing chiefly on the Division of Preservation and Access and the grants that are probably familiar to the World Archives and Special Collections and Records. However, I did want to include this chart in part because there are other programs at NEH that one wants to be aware of and perhaps look into, even though I'm not going to be dealing with them in detail. For example, the Division of Public Programs, which offers support and opportunities for outreach. Federal-state partnership, like the LSTA program through IMLS, this is a block grant to various state humanities councils, and in several cases, those institutions also do some granting, and they're definitely institutions that you want to become aware of. And something like, for example, the Office of Challenge Grants, where one can submit proposals for infrastructure support, endowed for example, and facility improvements. So good to keep aware of all of the different programs in NEH. Process definitely is something that we see as joined together, very much inseparable. The division was established in the early 1990s, even though we have precursors, as Susan indicated, going back to the early days of the endowment. We provide leadership and support for preserving and creating access to cultural heritage resources, and grants, as indicated here, are made to a variety of types of nonprofit institutions, including, of course, state and local governments. The preservation and access focus heavily on collections, and that covers a multitude of formats and content types, and this is an indication of that. Preservation Access grant programs, we have 7 of them, one of them done in fashion with the National Science Foundation, documenting endangered languages. I'm going to be concentrating chiefly on 3 of these here: the Sustaining Cultural Heritage Collections Program, Preservation Assistance Grants for smaller institutions, and Humanities Collections and Reference Resources. So HCRR has support available at 2 levels, planning level, which we term foundations, and implementation. And foundations subcategory in HCRR is something that was introduced a couple of years ago when we were beginning to see a lot of excellent proposals coming our way that simply weren't at a state of sufficient readiness. And rather than continuing to turn down those applications and inviting them to resubmit, we wanted to provide a basis for support for that type of deeper planning and prototyping. So that's what that project or program opportunity is about, and we're beginning to see good results from that. Then reference resources provides funding for a variety of activities. Some of these are very core and familiar to archival repositories. Arrangement, description, cataloging, conservation, treatment, digitization, proving access to born digital sources, but it also includes the creation of content. And the best way to think about this is thinking back perhaps to the days of reference library shelves and the kinds of things one might find there, encyclopedias, historical dictionaries, atlases. Increasingly, of course, these are now in line form, but they are foundational to research, education, public programming as our collections. Examples of projects that we've supported do include state and local government records. We haven't had a recent successful application from state archives for quite some time. These are more recent proposals that include content related to local state government, but they don't come from state archives, New York City Department of Records and Louisiana Museum Foundation, and in the latter case, that colonial records. Tribal holdings, like IMLS, we do offer support for Native American instance and are interested in assisting in the preservation and documentation of tribal culture. One important project along those lines that we supported recently was this one from Washington State University, which is approaching its work with a significant amount of sensitivity toward cultural ways of knowing through particular tribal experiences and providing a platform for acquiring and interpreting that information that's presented to those cultures as a way to participate. Resources part of HCRR include things such as this project, the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database, which documents some 35,000 slaving voyages, and roughly 10 million Africans were brought to North South America. And, this is a monumental database that's used in internship, really almost anything that involves the study of slavery and the African diaspora cites this resource now as something central to their work. We have also supported online encyclopedias, many of which have a state office. Most recently, the Encyclopedia of Virginia has received a couple of awards from us. The New Georgia Encyclopedia, I think our most recent award on a state level was to Colorado through the Colorado Humanities Commission. And even in the age of Wikipedia, good old vetted content written with effective or toward scholarship and peer review still has a place, and particularly a place in educational activities. This is a case where the humanities is brought to the public and humanities expertise in effective ways. The assistance grant category is for smaller institutions and medium-sized institutions as well, and as you'll see in just a minute, that's a diameter in the eye of the beholder. These are small grants up to $6,000, and we run this competition annually, as is the case with HCRR too. These are annual opportunities. Eligibilities include general preservation assessments, planning for other kinds of preservation work. The Indiana Commission on Public Records received an award in 2014, and this is to support a preservation assessment and preserve environmental controls and monitoring equipment. And here's a case where you might ask, well, is that a small institution? Well, I guess, or the answer is relative to what? And we've always kind of approached this with as an elastic a definition as we possibly can. So even if you see that smaller institutions little in that grant category, don't dismiss it if you see yourself in these kinds of activities that I'm running through. Development of plans for pest management, conservation treatment, disaster management, or storage, environmental equipment and supplies. And the Sam Houston Regional Library and Research Center of the Texas State Library and Archives Commission. Of activities in PAG, preservation workshops, disaster planning, emergency response training. And it's an excellent example of a program that really features collaboration. And I'll say more about collaboration more generally later. But the case where a library undertook the task of setting up some in-house workshops to serve the Mississippi Delta area broadly, and especially 5 institutions that have some extraordinary humanities content, but institutions that themselves would not have been able to be applicants or really to kind of pull an application together to undertake something like this. Training opportunities in preservation assistance grants to address some more contemporary issues with respect to preservation digital preservation management and best practices for creating sustainable digital resources, and also includes that would really be more in the area of access than preservation, best practices A&D and cataloging. This indicates this can be either hosted workshops on site or can be support for staff to attend workshops provided by others, such as SAA or organizations like Lyrasis and of that nature. About the Sustaining Cultural Heritage Collections program. This is a funding opportunity that grew out of a program previously called Stabilizing Humanities Collections. And it really focuses on the fundamental preservation challenges, kind of a macro level, humidity, high temperature, light, fire, security, etc. The new program, though, that resulted in redefining a few years ago is this notion of sustainable strategies, and this is coming out of newer preservation science that's looking at kind of conventional thinking in environmental control and asking questions about, is it really always necessary to have universal set points, for example, for relative humidity and temperature, and what's really critical here in terms of the kind of ingredients you need to balance, such as energy efficiency, cost effectiveness, risks to collection, and minimizing the impact on the environment. So presidents are beginning to say we need to take all of these ingredients into account in coming up with sustainable long-term preservation strategies and not try to focus too heavily and too rigidly on particular kinds of norms that had been prescribed in the past through preservation practices. This involves a significant amount of planning and interdisciplinary planning, and by that we mean bringing in, along with preservation specialists, engineers, architects, facilities managers, collection stewards, et cetera, and really looking at those various kinds of issues and coming up with plans for new storage facilities, for security, monitoring and control, for fire suppression systems, what have you. State Archive organization, the Georgia State Archive. This was about 3 years ago, I believe this grant was awarded, and this was an implementation project to upgrade environmental control and lighting systems and improve energy efficiency and reduce costs. This indicates hot off the press. We did just announce awards here from this grant category, and one of the awardees was the local government institution, Blount County in Maryville, Tennessee, which has an extraordinary collection dealing with the history of here settlement in what was called the Old Southwest at the time. And it's an interesting project that does take into account these issues of energy reduction and sustainability in conjunction with managing the collections in the most effective way. Just the words here about research and development and education and training opportunities. As it indicates, R&D projects are designed really to address broad issues of standards and best practices, and tend to be proposed by consortia of institutions. Could be an applicant as an institution or any group of repositories or working with other kinds of institutions, and focusing on these issues of standards and best practices, which I note is a goal in SAA's strategic plan document. And education and training grants are awarded to organizations that offer national or regional education and training programs. Here too, CoSA conceivably could be an applicant as an institution to further its objectives in some of its areas in perhaps doing workshops or other kinds of continuing education opportunities in some of the topics that it is particularly concentrating on. Just about the National Digital Newspaper Program, because we do have at least a few of these that are coordinated by institutions that oversee the state archives as well. As indicated, Bob was the director at Minnesota for the NDNP grant that they were awarded. Most recently, the Minnesota State Archives has been brought into the fold, as has Nevada. And here you see that we are now up to, I think it's 38 states and territories that are participants in this collaborative enterprise. We're working with the Library of Congress, which is serving as the primary repository of this content. And we hope to get all of the shades on this map filled in within the next few years. And you see some absences there if you're from one of these states that has not yet participated in NDNP. And to talk more about that, I'm happy to discuss that after our conversation today. About doing the work that I do and making the decisions, it is a bit of a meat grinding process, but it is something that's it is more of a deliberative, I would say, than something arbitrary. And our evaluation criteria, though they vary from program to program, tend to look often like this, with the significance of the project or the collection or the resource being developed for the humanities as the top criterion in every case. But also very aware of and keen on the importance of the proposed methodology. Plan is of sustainability, as Bob was indicating, are increasingly important to us. They're important to our panelists, and we are also asking questions about what we can expect along those lines, and our guidelines every year are tweaked along those lines as well. It is the last thing, and interestingly, our applicants often think of that as the thing they want to focus on most fully, and we always try to coach them to concentrate really on the message, on the merit of the project beyond the financials, because really to make the case on the basis of the excellence of the content and excellence of methodology. The budget is much more of a secondary consideration in the application process. A little bit on collaboration here to echo what Bob was saying. We too can't imagine that, particularly as the bridge marches on, that much of social demand can be accomplished without collaboration and sharing. And some of the most impactful projects that we're seeing that have involved NEH support are ones that are pretty deeply collaborative. The Medical Heritage Library, for example, plus digital archives, which some of you may have participated in, is still a very important project in providing fundamental access to a large number of archival holdings. The DPL, Digital Public Library of America, NEH, made substantial investment in that, as has IMLS, and that, of course, is heavily collective and continues to build that type of momentum of cooperation and sharing as it moves forward. And we're only seeing more of this, and I think it's only going to be more heavy by our reviewers as time goes on. Interest areas, just briefly, preservation and access. We have made known we are particularly interested in support for audiovisual collections. We see this content as among the most hidden of all collections, particularly for information regarding the 20th century. Preventive conservation, going back to that issue of sustainable approaches, we want to see more attention to the science of this, and also are interested in more institutions kind of taking this up as a strategy. And then digital stewardship, digital preservation. This is going to be, I think, a priority in some form or another for our division for some years to come. NEH has just recently announced a new endowment-wide initiative standing together with an emphasis on the history and experience of veterans and the experience of war and its consequences in American society. We don't know yet what this will result in terms of new grant opportunities or the ways that this initiative will unfold and be presented to potential applicants, but it is something to keep an eye on. For example, if you are in a repository that has substantial content related to military history. So that is it, and I too am happy to answer questions yet further today, as well as offline and after our session here this afternoon. Thank you very much.
So this is Susan. Ideally, if any of you have questions, you can indicate that you'd like to participate either online, by phone, by raising your hand, or type in the chat box or Q&A. Those questions come in if we have them from our participants today. Can each of you just quickly talk about funding from Congress and how that's going, and then how you each, if at all, each of your institutions consciously or unconsciously work together to cover all aspects of funding opportunities for projects so that there's not a great deal of overlap. I think you all do a pretty good job at that now, but just some comments generally from both of you.
The funding situation, goodness, maybe Joel, you might want to answer the federal budget. We have an agreement in place, but I don't think any regarding our agencies have come out or made introduced yet. So we have a general understanding that the budgets should remain stable, but I don't know of any indication that any definitive decisions have been made about those. And as to the latter, I think we talk a lot informally. We see each other quite a lot, all of our members of the staff, but I think we all talk about how many more things we could do to collaborate and have agencies work closer together.
Yeah, I would simply echo that last comment. I think that's exactly right. We're doing what we can to be aware of what each is concentrating on and what some of the projects that are being supported. But for opportunities and creative about ways that we might be able to collaborate in other sessions down the road. So it is something that we often think about. On the congressional allocation, it's still very early in the process for the 2015 budget. We did have a moment where there was from the House side that someone was introducing a bill that was reducing our budget pretty substantially. Lasted only for about a week or so, though, and I'm not quite sure exactly what happened. And the most recent information is that the House is, at least at the committee level, the Appropriations Committee that deals with the NEH, is proposing a number that's pretty even with where we are now.
Good news. Thank you both for answering that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for presentations, and I'm glad that we were able to give both of you a sufficient amount of time to get in a lot of information about each of your programs. This webinar is going to be available on recording, of course, to our members for those who weren't able to attend today. So I'm sure most of us will want to come back and look at some of the priorities that you've set out for us in making our considerations of how best to our applications so that we can encompass as many of those objectives as possible. And we appreciate all of the work that both organizations are doing to help us understand the application process better as well. I'm looking at a program. Time to turn it over to you for announcements. So seeing no other chat questions, am I missing anything?
I don't see anything, Susan.
Okay, just sure, because I had to log in twice, so I want to make sure I wasn't missing anything. So I'll hand it back to you, and thanks again to Joel and Bob for joining us today.
Great, thanks, and look forward to seeing you all soon.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks also, Bob and Joel. This has been helpful, I know, and when we meet in Washington, I'm sure you'll be flooded with lots of questions at that time. Again, everybody, I just want to some brief announcements. Of course, we're all looking forward to being together in Washington next month. And before I hit some of those highlights, I just want to remind you about the webinar evaluation that will be coming up at the conclusion of this webinar. So please take a few minutes to fill that out while the webinar is still fresh in your minds. Of course, also around Washington and our annual meeting with SAA and NAGARA. And here are some of the highlights of that event from CoSA's perspective. We hope that you will join us and join Preservica for a Preservica-sponsored forum for state libraries and archives on digital preservation issues. That is open to all. It's a free event, and it's open to all on Wednesday from 5:15 until 6:30. This is really an opportunity for a conversation around digital preservation issues and challenges. A couple of new things that we're going to be doing this year at the conference include an awards recipient recognition dinner, which will be on Thursday evening. CoSA's awards will be given out Thursday morning at the plenary, and we thought it would be just a lot of fun to be able to get CoSA members together in the evening over dinner to recognize these recipients and to celebrate the awards. So that dinner is going to begin at 6:30. It will be at the Lebanese Taverna, and the cost is $38 a person. You need to sign up in advance for that, and the RSVP deadline date is August 4th. So if you want to learn more about that, please send along an email, and we'll get back in touch with you with information on how to join that event. And all new, we'll be doing a raffle this year. We've got some great prizes coming in just today. SAA is offering a 50% off on educational workshop registrations, which is going to be good until next June. So that's a wonderful prize. We've got lots of others too, including gift certificates and this huge box full of train-related items for all you train buffs from the Norfolk Southern Corporation. We're going to do a logo scavenger hunt, which is going to be a lot of fun too, I think, and it's really geared at trying to raise CoSA's visibility virtually. So be on the lookout for that as well. we want to remind everybody that on Monday of that week, August 11th, our good friends Jelaine Chubb, David Carmichael, and Kathleen Rowe will be presenting an all-day workshop on advocacy. There is a fee connected with that, but I'm sure that you can still sign up for it, and it's just going to be chock full of great information regarding advocacy. And coming also a conference, PERT's Portal Workshop is to be your introduction to this wonderful, wonderful resource on our website, the PERT's Portal. Is funded by NHPRC, and we're devoting half a day on the 12th, half a day on the 13th to introduce it and to get people up to speed on how to use it and to take advantage of all the great information that's there now and that will be coming on board over the coming months. And a little further ahead to the fall, in October, our second series, Advanced Electronic Records Institute in Salt Lake City. This will be the gathering spot for most of the states and territories west of the Mississippi. And if it's anything like the Advanced Institute in Richmond, it's going to be just a great event. Note the Best Practices Exchange this year hosted by the Alabama State Archives. On our front, we've got lots of webinars scheduled for August and September. Join us back here again on August 28th for annual meeting and wrap-up of what went on in D.C. And we'll be answering questions. For those of you who won't be able to come to Washington, this is a great opportunity to find out when and what CoSA is planning for the future coming out of that meeting. CoSA member webinar in September will be the second SHRAB Town Hall. You may recall we do 2 SHRAB Town Halls every year, and the second one will be September 25th. We've got series webinars scheduled for September and October, and that many of you will be joining those. They're really popular and they're really good. And funders each year, our partnerships provide critical funding support for many of our membership activities and events. I'm especially grateful to Ancestry.com and our other corporate sponsors featured here, Family Search, the History Channel, Media Preserve, and Hollinger Metal Edge. Support for CoSA's initiatives is also generously provided by grants from the NHPRC and IMLS. And of how you can stay connected with us, they're in red, and that's Instagram, which is brand new. We have a brand new account. I don't think we've posted pictures yet, but we want you to follow us and post, and we'll be posting pictures, especially from the conference going forward. And of course, we're on Twitter now too, so be sure and follow us there as well. That is it for us, and we're almost at 4 o'clock. I don't see any questions posted. So we'll draw this webinar to a close and hope to see many of you in Washington in just 3 weeks. And back here again in late August for our conference wrap-up. So take care, everybody, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.